welcome back. It's the Marketer of the Day podcast, and Mr. Jason Greenwood is here. He is an e-commerce specialist. He is the founder of Greenwood Consulting, and they are a B2B e-commerce consultancy. For 20 plus years, Jason has been helping brands just like you architect compelling digital shopping and brand engagement experiences. He's the host of the E-commerce Edge podcast, over 400 episodes. He's a passionate e-commerce mentor, commentator, and keynote speaker and content producer. So we're going to find out some nitty-gritty stories. We're going to find out the secrets from Jason about e-commerce, about online business, about getting everything we want in life, and so much more. So Jason, glad to be speaking with you.
Mate, what an intro. I hope I can live up to the hype. It's so nice to be here with you today, Robert, and sort of sharing from my background, my experience of being an entrepreneur for, well over 25 years. I think it's probably been closer to 30 years now since I started my very first business with a business partner. So exciting times.
Wonderful. And so what is exciting for you? Like, what's the current passionate project? What's on the horizon? What's about to explode on you?
Well, look, probably it's even more my personal life than my professional life. Just right at the very moment, we move into our brand new townhouse here in Puebla, Mexico on Friday. But that leads to a conversation about entrepreneurship, leadership, marketing, etc. In that I am a digital nomad. And because of that digital nomad lifestyle and the fact that I work 100% remotely in my business, that is what has allowed me to travel the world. That's what's allowed me to go from, growing up in Southern California to living in New Zealand for almost 30 years, marrying a Kiwi wife, and then having been here in Mexico, traveling around for the last year and a half, and then deciding to put down some at least semi-temporary or semi-permanent roots here in Puebla. And so all of that's been made possible through my personal brand, through my consulting business, and also through, all these years of entrepreneurship and building businesses and building brands.
Exciting. You figured a lot out, right? And when you think about the digital nomad concept, it is silly that for all these centuries, millennia, we said like, hey, here's a map of the world and we're going to draw these lines on it. And usually like where you're born is where you stay. You always hear that data about like there's only like 50 or 70 miles radius of where someone is born to where they end up like living and dying. And I mean, the United States of America, right, was kind of built on this idea that you have to give up everything you've ever known and go around this world on some like scary ship. And you send money back home. And it seems silly when you think about it. But now we have the Zoom, the laptop, the cloud, the remote workers, and we can just like run our business from anywhere. And so when someone comes to you, Mr. Jason Greenwood of greenwoodconsulting.net, what is the problem they solve? Where is someone stuck and where do you help them out?
Yeah, so originally when I started out my consultancy, I only serviced and provided consulting services to merchants. And I consulted to D2C brands, B2C brands, B2B brands, etc. And my consulting focus is tech and operations. That's my specialty focus. So, solution design, technical design and architecture, organization design, process design, tech stack, search and select, and then also partner search and select for implementations. Now, as I went along, as the longer I did this as an independent, what I found is I wanted to go and focus in on as much of a blue ocean consulting environment as I possibly could. And what I discovered is that, everybody and their dog does generic e-commerce consulting. But what I found my specialist skill was working with B2B e-commerce brands. So that's brands that are selling to other businesses as opposed to selling to end consumers, businesses selling to businesses. And in many cases, those brands either were already D2C brands that wanted to add a B2B channel, or they were B2B brands that only sold, for example, through field sales reps or customer service or BDRs or BDMs, etc. And they wanted to establish, especially after COVID. COVID really put a rocket under these B2B brands that maybe historically had never done e-commerce. Maybe they did EDI, maybe they did e-procurement, but they had no self-service e-commerce solution at all available to their customers. And when COVID hit and their sales teams couldn't be out on the road, they literally physically could not go and visit customers anymore. They could not go on site and take orders on site anymore. And so maybe they took orders via email or fax or carrier pigeon, but they had no e-commerce. And so that was really when the opportunity started to explode as these B2B brands realized, geez, we really need to develop digital routes to market. Otherwise, we are dead because we don't know how long this pandemic is going to last. We don't know how long we're going to be locked down. We don't know how long our salespeople are going to be stuck in the office. We have got to establish digital routes to market. And I saw the writing on the wall, having been in the industry for over 20 years at that stage. I saw the writing on the wall and I was like, man, this B2B thing is just exploding. And I had experience consulting to B2B brands anyway, but I really dug deep. I doubled down on the B2B space, and that's almost exclusively who I service now. But over the last 2 years in particular, I've added a few more strings to my entrepreneurial bow, and I've expanded the consulting frameworks that I can deliver on and the ICPs that I can deliver to. So, but it's still adjacent. So I now consult to investors who want to invest in the e-commerce and omni-channel space, whether they want to invest in tech platforms, agencies, whatever. I consult to agencies that specialize in B2B e-commerce delivery. And I also specialize in consulting to platform vendors that want to rapidly identify product market fit, also their technical road mapping, their go-to-marketing, their messaging, their pricing. So now really I instead of consulting to only one cohort, that being merchants selling stuff, I now consult to the entire ecosystem. And that's been a really exciting pivot. And I'm proud to say that as of today, started that pivot 2 years ago. Not really a pivot, really just an enhancement of my services range. I'm proud to say that as of today, I have more non-merchant clients than I do merchant clients. So if I hadn't have added those additional services because the market was already asking me for them, if I hadn't done that 2 years ago, I don't know how successful my business would be today. Because, with consumers pulling in their horns in terms of spending, a lot of merchants are struggling today. But by being able to service multiple client avatars, it has really made my business more sustainable.
I love it. And I love the sort of self-awareness with your strategy and the evolution of it. And the blue ocean concept, it's always really cool, right? Like instead of fighting for what's already being done, what's already being established, you go and you find the wide open spaces and what's not being done yet. But then I think when people talk about that, they miss out a lot of the ingredients that you just mentioned, especially about people. Like you find the people that are stuck with what's currently happening, right? Or maybe when there's a big shift like the pandemic, like what's the current accelerator of what we can do. And so you're saying, well, so there's these businesses that they're maybe like behind the times, right? They don't have these things dialed in and they don't have their operations, their processes. And you say, well, let me find those people and let me find the B2B people specifically. That way we can like really get some massive volume happening. And so when you come and when you find these people, right, that need your expertise, they need the automation, they need the selling system, like where are they stuck? What do they tell you about their frustrations?
Usually 9 times out of 10, they don't even know where to start. So in other words, they might have gone to an agency, say, for example, they might have gotten even into discovery with an agency. But if they have no digital capability or very little digital capability in their business today, it's really difficult for them to tell an agency what their requirements are. So usually when an agency, and I know because I've run and built agencies before, we would get into discovery with clients. And if by the middle of the first day, every answer we get from the client is, or the prospect is, we don't know, aren't you the expert? Aren't you supposed to be telling us what to do? Well, that's great. We can tell you about the tactical execution. We can tell you about the solution architecture to meet your needs, but the strategy has to come from inside the business. And if the business doesn't have a clear digital strategy, right, then it makes it very, very difficult for them to communicate to an agency what they need to deliver on that strategy, right? So that's where I come in. I come in that really messy first phase where oftentimes these businesses, they don't necessarily have an e-commerce manager yet. In the B2C and D2C world, they're 10 years ahead, 10 to 15 years ahead of the B2B world. It would be very, very rare for a B2C or a D2C brand not to do e-commerce today. It would be extremely rare. In the B2B world, that is still extremely common. And so the B2B world is still way, way behind. And so oftentimes they don't have, a CDO. So they don't have a chief digital officer. They don't necessarily have a head of e-commerce or an e-commerce manager. They don't necessarily have a specialist in digital services at all inside their business. They might have an IT team that runs the ERP or back office systems, but they don't have any customer-facing digital chops. And that's really where I come in, and I help them identify their requirements. I help them document their requirements. I help them base their technical selection on an 80-20 percentage ratio of capability versus needs. Meaning, once we identify what they need and the type of customer experience they want to create for their customers, then I help them select technology that does 80% at least of what they need out of the box without heavy customization. Because the last thing we want is them to launch with a whole bunch of technical debt from day one. So we match their requirements with technical solutions in the market. Then once we do that, then we architect that. We draw up what's called a BRD, a business requirements document, usually about 20, 25 pages. Then I help them go to market and identify the partners. With that BRD in hand, we go to some agency partners or some implementation partners, and we say, here's our requirements. Can you please put a proposal together for us of what it's going to cost us, roughly how long it's going to take, what resources are you going to bring to the table, what system integrations are you going to own versus us, etc. And that's really what I do. So I go in and I act effectively as a guide, a coach, a mentor. I even lead demo sessions for them with these technologies that they're considering. And I really just hold their hand right from the point of knowing almost nothing in some instances. Sometimes they'll know more than others, but oftentimes they don't know much about digital at all. They might know lots of things about their products, lots of things about their brand, lots of things about how to service the customer at a high level, but oftentimes they do not have digital chops. And that's where I come in and give them some real serious firepower there and make sure that they're selecting the right technology, they're putting the right processes in place, and they're selecting the right partners to deliver on that vision.
Amazing. I love your thought process here. You said a lot of amazing things, like the identifying what the customers need and the 80-20 of it, and getting that right person in place and getting the technology figured out. And it's really great to hear, because a lot of times, and I'm sure you know, like maybe these companies have tried this on their own, or they've tried to hire like one person to do this. And there's the problem of being like one extreme or the other, right? We've all had that person like make a proposal and it's just like this long document. It's like a bunch of nothing. And then there's the other extreme where maybe someone set up a whole like process map and set up all kinds of automation. You look at it and you're like, you made a whole spider web mess. And maybe they're thinking like, hey, now I've got job security because no one else can understand this whole thing that I created. And so I like a lot of what you're mentioning here about just like having kind of the recurring attention, the kind of cyclical awareness, and saying like, hey, we're going to make sure that that this works and that this makes sense and it's the right tool. And so like, what do you think, what kind of horror stories have you seen, right? If someone has like all these things you mentioned, right? Like the setting up like the automation, you must have seen some failed attempts. So like what's like the horror stories of like, if someone tries this without you, what can go wrong?
Well, one of the things that I see that I often have to come in to do, I'm brought in as the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, meaning that they've had a failed project. They maybe have put $100, $200, $300, $400,000 into a project that have never gotten live. They never gotten live with a back end system, because I consult across the ERP, the CRM, the CDP, the PIM, the ecom, the whole stack, the whole commerce stack. And I think one of the differentiators between your typical consultant is that I'm not just a consultant. I've been at the pointy end. I've owned my own e-commerce pure play business. I have run and built agencies, so I know what that looks like, and I know what delivery looks like from the agency side. But I've also worked inside some of the biggest brands in the world, particularly down in the ANZ region, and I've actually walked through. So the last role where I worked as an employee for a brand, we, over a period of 3 years, we replatformed every single piece of technology we had in the business. So we replatformed our e-commerce platform, our system integration, our ERP. We implemented a CRM for the first time. We implemented PIM for the first time. So I said all that to say that I'm not just a theorist, I'm also a doist. So I've actually been in the trenches. I know what it feels like as a brand to go through massive digital transformation internally, to run these projects that feel like they're never going to end. When people get a disillusion, to have to fly the flag and be the champion for the project and the program of work. So I'm not just a theorist. I've been in the trenches, and I've done what these guys are trying to do. And so I have a unique position of empathy with my clients, because I know how difficult this is. I know how hard change management is. But oftentimes when I go in, they maybe have had a failed exercise with a previous consultant. And look, there's a lot of consultants out there that give us good guys with good intent a bad name and a black eye, unfortunately. And oftentimes when they go in, they're too high level. The consultants are too high level. They're too strategic in their thinking, but they actually don't know the step-by-step process that needs to happen to pull a program of this scale off. And so oftentimes they go in with these visionary ideas, which are great, and they get the business all amped up about what could happen and what could be done and how much money we could make off of digital channels and how much how many new customers we could acquire digitally. And oftentimes when it gets into the actual implementation phase, those consultants disappear into the woodwork and they're nowhere to be seen, because that's when the rubber hits the road. That's when the challenges begin. That's when the disillusionment happens. That's when the internal alignment starts to fall apart. And you need to go back in. Oftentimes, as a consultant, you need to rally the troops. You need to tell them this is normal. Don't panic. It's hard. This scale of digital transformation that these businesses are on a journey of, this is not easy. When you go from a legacy business, and many of these B2B brands that I work with, they are 50, 75, 100-year-old brands. Oftentimes it's the child or the grandchild of the founders who is now taken over as the CEO, the IT manager, the COO, the CFO, whatever it might be. And they're trying to keep those legacy businesses relevant by infusing them with digital capabilities for their customer base. And it's hard. These legacy businesses that have been doing the same thing the same way for 100 years, it's just hard. And so you have to be able to help them keep the faith that the outcome is worthwhile. And oftentimes, I'll say one final thing and then I'll hand it back to you. When I go in, oftentimes one of the first things I need to do, because they haven't done it themselves, is I will lead the interview process with existing customers. And I will talk to them. Hey, we're starting to look at potentially implementing an e-commerce platform and an e-commerce solution or a buyer's portal for the very first time. Is that of interest to you? Do you think it would be interesting? And sometimes they'll say, no, actually, we're quite happy dealing with Bob or Jane, who's our account manager. We wouldn't order online. But then when you recontextualize those questions, you say, well, would you like to be able to log in and at least see what we carry in our catalog? How much inventory we have, what your prices are, what your MOQs are, what your buying increments are. Would you like to be able to track orders? Even if you don't buy through the portal, would you like to be able to track orders from the time they leave our warehouse to the time they hit your warehouse? Would you like to place a quote request electronically 24 hours a day through a buyer's portal? Would you like to lodge a return, an RMA request? Would you like to be able to do that electronically? And they start to go, oh, yeah, maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I already buy EDI today, which is my ERP talking to your ERP, but all these other services sound really interesting and would make us more efficient as a business. So yeah, let's talk about that. And so what people call e-commerce is changing, and it's especially changing in the B2B world because it's a whole suite of digital services. It's not just the buy now button, and I think that's critical.
Yeah, and what I like about all of this is it's like you're great at getting the excitement and the magic back out of something that, if you're not careful, it's kind of boring, right? Talking about like inventory management and things like that. And it's just, I love your kind of software mindset here, where you have to kind of do it things on multiple levels and multiple angles, right? There's kind of, like you said, the high level strategicness of it, and then like further down there's more like, well, what am I actually going to architect and debug the system and follow through? And then there's maybe like a somewhere in the middle there are like the user stories and figuring out like what path do you want to take. And I don't know about you, but like post-pandemic, I'm a newish parent. I have a 4-year-old, and man, the amount of portals and apps to have to deal with from like school and soccer practice, I'm just like, why is this an app and what are these tabs? And it's missing the kind of the exciting paths that you're mentioning of like, man, wouldn't it be great to log in and do this and do that and save all this time? It's like it's very much needed, especially. And I'm so I guess the big lesson from our conversation here I'm getting is that it helps to have a brain on the problem such as yours, right? Who's saying like, hey, you've got this legacy business, this multi-generations. It might be like a Sears or a Montgomery Ward, and it's been doing great until now, but hey, it's time to innovate. And you've tried all these things, but maybe you just haven't had all the right brain power and the people power and the software in place. And it's time for someone to kind of connect those dots together. And so I want to make sure in a couple of minutes from now here to mention some calls to action, to mention like your website and your services. But in this last little space in between, I want to make sure we get to your amazing podcast, because whenever I have another podcaster on, there's someone usually like you that has like hundreds of episodes and there's all kinds of cool stories. And my question always to a podcaster is, okay, when we go to your podcast, is there like a number one best episode? If we go to the E-commerce Edge podcast, is there an episode that just like blew your mind that's like a great introduction into what you do and people you help?
Look, I could give you an episode number, but what I'd rather do is I'd rather talk about the 3 different types of episodes I release every week, because I think that'll be more relevant to your audience. So we have 3 different types of episodes, and we release them on 3 different days during the week. So on Mondays, we release what's known as our Mentoring Moments episodes, and those are snippets taken from my one-to-one mentorship, as well as guest mentors that I get in to interview and talk about subject matter that I am not an expert on. So educating me and educating my audience at the same time. Wednesday is our B2B focus. So that is all about B2B e-commerce. So it's agencies, it's consultants, it's platform vendors, it's everybody, it's actual brands themselves and merchants doing B2B e-commerce and doing it well and having conversations about that and what that looks like. Our Friday episodes are our tech episodes, and those are our OG episodes. That's the very first episode type that we ever started out with, and we added B2B and mentorship later. And Friday is all about e-commerce, omnichannel, and digital retail tech. So I'm interviewing usually founders, CXOs, CEOs, CTOs, CIOs of platform or technology vendors working specifically in the e-commerce, omnichannel, and digital retail space. And sometimes I'm talking about back office systems. Sometimes I'm talking about front end customer facing systems. Sometimes I'm talking about commerce enablement technology. So apps and plugins that help the e-commerce experience be better for the customer. So those are the three groups that I'm talking about. And so basically we have a little something for everyone, I'd like to think, as part of the podcast. So with over 410 episodes released now, there's a little something for everyone.
I love that structure because, there's always the talk these days with AI with like hyper personalization and this whole thinking of like, well, is someone going to see my show as like a mix of these things? You're like, hey, on Wednesdays this is your jam, and I'm sure it also helps for you to like fill the schedule and figure out like topics and guests. It's kind of like when you watch Star Trek, it's like every season they're like, hey, it's another Q episode this season. It's a Borg episode. It's the Klingon episode. It's like you have kind of the recurring themes, and it's somehow the structure helps with the creativity and the kind of the generativeness of it. So that podcast, it's called The E-Commerce Edge, and that is an amazing setup. You have those different days for like the tech day, and you're learning along with them, and the industry leaders. And so as far as like the big picture, right? We mentioned about all these amazing things you do, the people that you've helped. If someone is going to go to greenwoodconsulting.net, what type of business or person would be going there, and how can you help? What problem would they have for you?
Sure. So typically they're a B2B brand or merchant that either doesn't do e-commerce today, or they've got a legacy e-commerce platform that's a decade old or something like that. It's creaking at the seams. It's not ready to scale. Their salespeople hate it, so they never promote it, and the customers don't use it. Those are the typical scenarios. My ICP is brands doing at least $20 million a year in GMV across all channels. So basically $20 million a year in revenue or more. So basically that $20 million a year all the way up to about $1 billion a year is kind of my sweet spot. Private companies, I don't work with public companies typically because they're too big and too slow, and they think they've got it all figured out. So I find that it's a bit of a dead end working with public companies. Usually they are privately owned companies. Usually they are not always, but they're often family-owned businesses still, and I'm dealing usually directly with the founders or the leadership team of that business, and it's very much a program of work that is mandated from the top down. They've recognized at board level, at the CXO level, that this is something they must do. E-commerce is now table stakes. It's an absolute expectation. Or maybe they do, EDI, or maybe they're thinking about adding EDI, which is basically electronic data interchange form of digital commerce, or e-procurement, dealing with procurement technology on the buy side, and they want to be able to service that technology from the sell side. So that's really the special place that I come from. And oftentimes so if I was still working in the B2C and D2C world, my client representative on the client side would typically be the marketing team. Oftentimes those projects are marketing led. On the B2B side, oftentimes it's either sales or IT led. So it's a sales team that will oftentimes own that digital channel, or it will be the IT team because they deal with all the back office business systems that need to be integrated with that front end experience to make it pretty sweet. So that's really my ICP. And then of course, basically anybody who's looking to invest in the e-commerce or omni-channel space in terms of investing in technology players, et cetera, and they need due diligence done and that kind of thing, I help out with that. I help out with agencies that are focused on B2B and growing their B2B capabilities. Maybe they have historically only ever done D2C and B2C, and they now want to dip their toes in the B2B water, and they don't really know where to start. I help agencies do that. And then I help platform vendors that are really looking to make sure that they have perfect product market fit with their technology. Those are really the main buckets that I deal with. But from a merchant perspective, ICP is 20 million to $1 billion. Private companies, usually founder led, and they really want to move the needle really, really quickly in their business from an e-commerce perspective.
Very cool. Well, you know exactly what you're on, right? You know exactly the kind of person that you want to get, and you have, like you said, the 30 years of experience. You've done it all. You've been in their position. You know what to do, what not to do. You know about those concerns, and you're applying correctly a lot of these like kind of marketing platitudes that we always hear about, right? You hear about those phrases like make your prospects feel like you've read a page out of their journal, and some of these stories that you told seem to be exactly that. And so, what are some next steps, call to actions here? You mentioned the e-commerce edge podcast, you mentioned greenwoodconsulting.net, but sometimes at the end of a podcast, someone's like, well, where does Jason want me to go? So where are you directing us to?
Go and connect with me on LinkedIn. I put out most of my content there, even when I drop new episodes on the podcast. I try to always post about it on LinkedIn. I'm also increasingly spending a lot more time on Reddit trying to answer questions on Reddit about e-commerce as much and as often as I can. But LinkedIn is the OG platform that I spend the most time on from a social perspective. So go and connect with me there, and you'll be able to see everything I put out.
Awesome. So go to LinkedIn, click that search button, search for Jason Greenwood. If you see it's the one from Greenwood Consulting, currently in Puebla, Mexico, but with being world traveler, who knows where the next stop is, maybe even permanently or temporarily. So Jason Greenwood on LinkedIn, go and connect with him, check out his posts, start that conversation. I mean, LinkedIn, at least for me, Jason, like every 6 months, it like takes another, it like encapsulates, takes over my life a little bit more, right? Just as far as like, I used to go there like once a month, once a week. Now I'm on there every day, and just the amount of really exciting, amazing, helpful content there is just, it always blows my mind. So Jason Greenwood on LinkedIn, your go-to B2B e-commerce specialist and consultant. And so as people are going there to Jason Greenwood on LinkedIn, it's time to put you on the spot a little bit, try to stump you, because it's always fun with the podcast to end with a bang instead of a whimper. So with all of your travels and experiences, it can sometimes help to get the little soundbite for social media, including LinkedIn, and ask you for a fun quote or lesson that has really helped you, that can help us. So what comes to mind to you for a fun quote or lesson?
Travel early and often. Travel as much as you possibly can. It will improve your life in ways that you cannot even anticipate. You know, as someone who grew up in America, you know, lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years, now lives in Mexico, but I've traveled to many places around the world. I tell you, it's made me a better human. It's made me a better operator. It's made me a better entrepreneur. It's made me a better marketer. It's helped to build my personal brand. It's given me a level of joy and fulfillment that I couldn't get any other way. But more importantly, it has helped to develop my skills of empathy. It has allowed me to see the world through other people's eyes instead of my, I like to say that as an American, probably when I left, I had the perfect blend of ignorance and arrogance. And I think that travel cures you of both of those things. So I would say travel as much as you possibly can for a better life.
Very insightful. There's no excuse anymore to do it, right? With the longer lifespans, mobility, get to traveling. It expands the minds, helps with the empathy, joy, fulfillment, all those other amazing things. So you heard it from Mr. Jason Greenwood himself. So find him on LinkedIn, get to traveling, book that cruise, book that plane ticket flight, and check out some new adventures and experiences, including the e-commerce edge podcast. So we'll see you when you add Jason Greenwood on LinkedIn. And thank you very much, Jason, for a fun thrill ride. You said at the beginning, before we hit record, that you would be the easiest podcast I've ever had, and you definitely delivered. So thank you for that, Mr. Jason Greenwood.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Robert. I really appreciate your time. It was a pleasure.
All right.